Let me start there with Chris Mannix, who joins us now in the bubble, Sports Illustrated NBA senior writer. Was that a makeup call on the Greek Freak with Jimmy Butler?
I don't know if it was a makeup call. You can certainly argue that it was, given it was the exact same referee that made that call. And you can certainly defend the legality of the call. And I think you will see that defended in the last 2-minute report that comes out later this afternoon. But I mean, those were two calls that I think you put your whistle in your pocket in those situations. I mean, I understand on the first one, you've got to let a guy land. This has been something the NBA has called consistently. It dates back to when Kawhi Leonard got injured a few years ago by stepping. I think it was Zaza Pachulia stepped underneath him. The NBA is very specific on making that particular call. But the second one, I mean, you had another referee, Dan, right there, 5 feet away, and he doesn't make the call. I just don't. I mean, the makeup call is a very sensitive thing to NBA referees. I think it was it 2011 when a referee actually sued a reporter for tweeting about a makeup call, tweeting he heard something about a makeup call. So this has always been a sensitive topic, but it certainly, I think it was Bill Spooner back in the day. You have to look that up, but it's something the league is very sensitive about.
And I understand it that as a shooter, when you go up, you'll see guys, they used to just put their foot underneath you just to have you think of something other than taking that shot. Like, now I got to worry about coming down. Chris Middleton is jumping into Goran Dragic's space. So he's initiating that, and that's why I wouldn't have given him the benefit of the doubt there. And I wouldn't have called the foul on the Greek Freak. I hated to see it come down to something like that. But here we are with the Miami Heat up 2-0. How much trouble is Milwaukee in right now?
Oh, an enormous amount of trouble. I mean, look, there are all sorts of advantages Miami has had in this series, but I think Eric Spoelstra has been masterful in this series. You watch these two games, and I've been there for him, and it just seems like Miami is a step ahead of Milwaukee on everything. They can anticipate what Milwaukee is going to do offensively, defensively. They're exploiting every weakness that the Bucks have. Their shooters are playing with enormous confidence. Jimmy Butler, most of the time, looks like the best player on the floor. I'm with you, Dan. You've got to play Giannis 40-plus minutes in these next few games. Yeah. What are you saving him for at this point? I had a coach talk to me about something that fits in this just the other day. We were talking about Boston. Now Boston's 6-0 now, and one of the things the coach said was like, the Celtics don't have great depth, but what do you need great depth for in the playoffs? Like in the regular season, depth is awesome. Like you can play, you go 9-10 deep. In the playoffs, you really only need to go 7 deep and play your guys extended minutes to get wins. And the Bucks got to, throw their depth out the window and just play their best guys as much as possible if they want to have any hope of getting back in the series.
Who's in more trouble, the Raptors or the Bucks?
I think the Bucks are. Only because I think the Raptors have a certain mental toughness that developed last year that will allow them to bounce back. And look, game 2 was lost because Marcus Smart went berserk. Like, how often are you really going to expect Marcus Smart to have 5 3-pointers in a 3-minute span? I mean, the Raptors were in pretty much control there. So I think their mental toughness, that I think, I've written this a couple of times, like Kawhi Leonard is gone, but Kawhi Leonard is still there with the Raptors. He taught them a lot about how to shake off losses and just, put it aside and get back and get out there playing. The question for the Raptors, though, is when is Pascal Siakam going to show up for this postseason?
Good point.
I mean, he has not been the Siakam we saw pre-pandemic in this restart. I mean, the seeding games, he shot the ball poorly. He had, I think, only one game in the first round where he shot better than 43%. I think he had only 2 points on free throws in the fourth quarter of game 2. Nick Nurse has told me, like, this is the guy we need to make plays for us in end of game situations. You can have all the quality shooting you want with Lowry and Van Vliet and Anunoby and all those guys. At some point, somebody's going to make a shot for you. And Siakam has been billed as that guy. He hasn't been that guy up to this point. Boston's got like 3 of them that can make shots for you in those situations. Siakam's the one guy Toronto has, and he hasn't done it yet.
Rockets Thunder, the Rockets survive. James Harden, his defense helps the Rockets move on to face the Lakers. What's the takeaway from Rockets Thunder?
I tell you, sitting courtside last night, like, towards the end of the game, you could almost like feel the sizzling hot Rockets takes like enveloping you. Like people like trade James Harden, Mike D'Antoni's fired, Russell Westbrook. If Russell Westbrook could have gone for 40, 20, and 20, it would have been all his fault in this game. Like you could just feel the criticisms boiling over.
Okay, but if Dort hits that shot, though, Chris, what are you saying today about the Rockets?
I'm saying look, Dan, I wrote half the column, so I can go find it if you want. Like, it's just, I had the hot takes too. Like, it's right there.
You should post the half the column you were writing if the Rockets lost last night.
You write the topper and fill in the quotes. That's like how you do it. You probably, look, Mike D'Antoni would have been gone out the door. You probably would have had, and you may still have, a discussion about trading James Harden down the line. I mean, if they had failed in the first round, and not just failed in the first round, but failed in the first round to a team that they dumped their other star player on this past offseason. I mean, Chris Paul, not to change the topic here, but Chris Paul, I mean, long, you talk to people in the Oklahoma City organization, like Chris would never admit it, but like he could taste this. Like he wanted this as bad as any series I think he's ever played in. And, I don't know what the dynamic is between Paul and Harden, behind the scenes, but, at the end of the game, Paul, hugged Russell Westbrook for a good 5 or 6 seconds. He basically tapped James Harden on the side on the way out the door and said goodbye there. So there's a strange dynamic there. The Rockets, though, they live to fight another day, but the franchise, I think it would have been shaken up significantly. I think you would have seen at least one blockbuster deal.
How could you trade James Harden?
Boss, we can trade anybody. How could you trade Chris Paul? Like Chris Paul was 34 years old.
Chris Paul is at the end of his career.
No, but like, what do you say? I mean, I'm saying like, you might be asking a different question. Like I'm saying, how do you trade a guy with that big contract? You can trade any kind of contract you want. I think there would be a market for James Harden. Okay. I think it would have been a handful of teams out there. You can always turn to the Knicks and ask them to do something crazy.
All right, let's look at the matchup for the Lakers here with the Rockets. And I thought that the Rockets had the higher ceiling, with the Thunder and the Rockets, a higher ceiling. There are times when their basement is a lot lower. So I don't know what we're going to get. The Lakers probably don't know what they're going to get here. So how would you handicap this matchup between these two?
What it boils down to for me is a lot of what the Lakers-Blazers first round series boiled down to, and that is for the Rockets to have any chance of winning, you have to have the most dominant performance ever by Harden Westbrook. Like they have to average between them 55 to 60 points, 10 to 20 assists, and they've got to shoot, 35+% from three and 45+% from the floor. I mean, that's their only advantage. I mean, the Rockets, when they start game one tomorrow, like their tallest player might be like the fourth tallest player on the Lakers. Like it's going to be such a weird dynamic out there with the supersized Lakers versus the super small Rockets. And look, they've won games. I think in the seeding games, Milwaukee out-rebounded them by like 30. So they've won games where they've been crushed on the boards. They've just had to make threes at a historically high level. So they're probably going to put up between 50 and 60 threes per game in this series. They've got to make 35, 40% of them. And Harden and Westbrook have to be a huge part of that.
Nuggets, Clippers. What do you expect out of this?
I like the Clippers reasonably comfortably. I've long believed, and I've said this, I think, to you before, the Clippers are the type of team that is going to significantly improve every single game because you saw what they were in the seeding games, desperately trying to get all 9 of their rotation players on the floor. Montrezl Harrell just got back for game one of that last series, and you saw them get progressively better. They had their lapses, of course. Paul George stunk it up in the first few games, and Luka Doncic just went crazy in a couple of them. But I like what I saw. I mean, Kawhi is playing at a Kawhi-like level. And I just think the way the matchups play out with Kawhi and Paul George able to match up with Jamal Murray, they've got some bodies you can throw at Nikola Jokic as well. The Nuggets are gassed too, Dan. I mean, I went to their practice yesterday, and there was open grumbling about how they have to turn around after a 7-game series and play the rested Clippers, 36 hours later or whatever it was. I just don't know how much the Nuggets are going to have left in the tank to play a team this deep and this talented like LA.
McLovin brought this up about 20 minutes ago, and he said, why don't we wait until the end of the postseason to name the MVP?
But for just the MVP or all the awards? Like, I mean, where are we dividing the line here?
McLovin, where are you dividing the line here?
Why not all the awards?
Because some guys might not be eligible, Perloff. Like if you have like the sixth man of the year that's on a team that didn't make the playoffs, are you going to give a playoff team the benefit of 4 or 5 more games for their guy to sway voters? I mean, that's part of it. It's a regular season award.
I think the awards process will survive if the Washington Wizards 6-man gets robbed of an award because he didn't make the playoffs.
All right. Well, Brandon Ingram won Most Improved Player this year. I mean, what if they had the playoffs and Bam Adebayo, who came in second place, had the benefit of 2 rounds or 3 rounds or whatever it was? I mean, I
Chris,
think you gotta,
I can't give Brandon Ingram Most Improved if you're the
I didn't either.
second
I
pick
didn't
overall.
No, Dan.
You
we
can't
don't
be a
agree on-
lottery pick and be Most Improved Player.
We disagree on a lot, but on this one, we are in lockstep. Like,
Yeah.
It is insane to me when I look at that voting. I look at that voting and I see Brandon Ingram and Luka Doncic in like the top 4. Like, what are we doing here? These are guys. There's one that was compared favorably to Kevin Durant, and one who in his rookie year was being called like the next great international player, one of the greatest international players of all time. For me, it's Bam Adebayo. I voted for Davis Bertans second because he came out of nowhere after being traded from the Spurs, basically dumped onto the Wizards. He got there. And then Devontae Graham, who was a second-round pick with Charlotte. Like, he made a big splash this year.
That's better.
And that's what it should be. It's insane to give top 3 picks the Most Improved Player award.
Is Billy Donovan staying in Oklahoma City?
This is going to be one of the most interesting offseason questions, because going into that game last night, we were all kind of fixated on Mike D'Antoni, right? Would he be back with the Rockets next year? Billy Donovan coached the last game of his contract with Oklahoma City. And, Sam Presti, the Thunder GM, and Donovan have not sat down and spoke. Presti's been on record saying he wants Donovan to come back. But I think what it comes down to for Billy Donovan is, what's the direction of this team? Like, this was kind of fool's gold this year. That might be the wrong phrase, but like, nobody expected this to happen with Oklahoma City. I think Billy Donovan wants to know, what's the plan here? I mean, this guy was brought in back in 2015 to coach a team headlined by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. Now he's coaching a team without those 2 players, and it's very much unclear what the Thunder want to do. Do they want to tear this thing down and start a full rebuild? Do they want to build off some of these young players and keep Chris Paul for the next couple of years? I think Billy just wants some clarity on what this team's future is going to look like over the next 3 or 4 years. But he'd be a very interesting, coaching candidate on the free agent market, both for the pro ranks, where there's a few openings still, and even the college ranks. I mean, he's one of the most successful college coaches of this century. He would be appealing to, I think, a lot of big-time college programs.
Oh, before I let you go, we mentioned this earlier. Richard Jefferson, the former NBA player, now an analyst, said that Greek Freak is basically Scottie Pippen, and he needs himself a Michael Jordan, which I thought, there's not a bunch of Michael Jordans out there. So I'm not quite sure, in fairness to Richard Jefferson, like, does he have a point here that the Greek Freak is not your alpha and your 1A guy?
Not really. I mean, I think before you can make that type of assumption, you have to get Giannis a running mate, the equivalent of Scottie Pippen, don't you? I mean, Chris Middleton's a good player. I had him 3rd team All NBA this year at a guard spot. But if you look at the top tier teams in the NBA, there's a big gap between Giannis's number 2 and whether it's LeBron's number 2 or Kawhi's number 2 or some of these other. You've got to. I mean, I think this is going to turn out to be more about Giannis's supporting cast than it is anything else if this team gets beat in the second round. I do think a lot of it's on Giannis. I mean, you can't turn the ball over like he did in game 1. You've got to make plays, and frankly, don't answer questions like, if somebody asks you, do you want to play every minute? Don't say, I'm going to leave it up to my coach. Say, if you try to take me out of this game, what would Jordan do? What would Kobe do? They wouldn't let themselves be taken out of these types of games. So I think Giannis is going to be a lot more assertive moving forward. But I mean, it's a bit of a stretch to call a guy that's going to be a 2-time MVP, a Scottie Pippen more than a Michael Jordan. Good
stuff, Chris. You doing okay in the bubble?
I'm on my last few days here, Dan. I'm getting out on Sunday, and I'm good with that. I'm good. Yeah,
You look like you're frazzled.
Haggard might be.
Yeah, rough.
A little rough around the. It is like I mean, it's one of these experiences, and I'm going to write about this a little bit on Monday. Like, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's been probably the most meaningful professional experience of my life because of everything that's gone on, and really being able to document history down here as it's played out, both with, competing in this COVID-19 era and what happened with the players in the aftermath of the Jacob Blake shooting. But when you're down here, you commit all day, every day to the job. Like, I'm up 6:30, 7 o'clock every morning. I get back from games 1:30, 2 o'clock at night. It's every single day. And I don't have a problem with it, but I wouldn't count on me surfacing for more than, a couple of hours for the next week or so when I get out of here.
Fritzy, don't call Mannix.
I should not.
Yeah, let him kind of decompress.
But he likes my constant texts all hours of the day.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
Tell Paulie to bring a couple, little maple syrup over to Vermont. I'll be camped out up there for the next week.
12-pack of Bud Light.
Ooh, I like it.
Hey, that's a Vermont beer. Bud Light.
Thank you, Chris.
Big Vermont beer.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, Dan.
That's Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated NBA senior writer.